Did AEW President Tony Khan accidentally let slip that CM Punk has, or at least had, an office role with All Elite Wrestling? We're going to talk about that. Plus, Jon Moxley, of course, has signed a new 5-year contract with All Elite Wrestling. But what does it mean for his future with GCW, especially after his matches this past weekend with the organization? Saraya, did she have conversations with WWE about a possible in-ring return there? Plus, Tony Khan gives us an update on the AEW rankings. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. So let's start off talking about CM Punk. I know, AEW talking about CM Punk, the drama surrounding him. It's another day, ends in Y, and we're talking about Punk and AEW. But this is a really actually interesting story here because AEW president, CEO, head of creative, general manager, whatever title you want to call him, he might have slipped up slightly and actually revealed some details about CM Punk's current role, past role, previous role, depending on how you look at it, with All Elite Wrestling. Now, this one really interests me because when CM Punk signed with AEW, they had this media scrum, which you can see right there. It was at Rampage, the first dance, United Center, Chicago. We remember it very well. And afterwards, when asked about his contract with AEW, all that he really said is, well, I don't want to get into the finer details of it, but it's a multi-year agreement or I'm going to be here for a while. And people just assumed, oh, it's a talent role. He's going to be in a talent role in AEW. That's fine. But when CM Punk went on that big media scrum rant, that infamous rant and that now infamous speech during the AEW All Out post-show media scrum, he said that he was trying to run a business. And that always stuck to me as being quite odd. Trying to run a business? How are you trying to run a business? You're just a talent. You're just getting paid by the promoter, by the owner of the company, and Tony Khan. Doesn't sound like running a business. Well, maybe, just maybe, CM Punk was more than a talent for AEW. Maybe he had an office role. Maybe, alongside the likes of Kenny Omega, alongside the likes of the Young Bucks, maybe CM Punk himself might have been an executive vice president. This is a really fascinating story that, again, Tony Khan has kind of let slip here. And actually, realistically, this interview that Tony Khan did where he's mentioned this has been out for quite a while. So it's only really just starting to sort of make headlines now. So details of CM Punk's prominent backstage role in AEW may have actually been revealed by Tony Khan in a recent interview. Now, he was asked during an interview that he had with Ariel Helwani, and this was prior to last week's Dynamite 3-year anniversary show, and he was asked in the interview, how'd you put a show together? Who'd you talk to? What's your kind of, for lack of a better term, creative team? Who do you talk to? Who do you bounce ideas off? Where do you sort of go? And his response was really interesting. Now, I've actually got a clip here of Tony Khan's response when talking to Ariel Helwani. Of course, shout out to Ariel Helwani. If you haven't checked out the channel, all things pro wrestling, MMA, fantastic. I don't need to big up Ariel Helwani. The guy is legendary in the journalism field of combat sports, so check out his channel. But here's a clip and a really interesting note of what Tony Khan had to say about CM Punk's role in AEW, specifically who he talks to when putting the show together and talking about creative.
But I'll come in with an outline and I'll sit down with Tony Schiavone, QT, a couple people backstage. Sanjay has become really valuable. And then there's a lot of people throughout the years, that you'd go to, whatever their stuff is. I think there's specific people, even if they're not working in an office job per se, that you'd go to, like a Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley. And of course, people who are working, even office jobs like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and CM Punk and, different people that would.
Now that is absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating, is it not? And it was the pause he took right at the end there as well. So he's talking about people that he's spoken to in the past when he says, I'll rely on people and I'll talk to people. And he basically means talent that's very experienced, has been around for a while, etc. So Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley. And you go, well, of course, you would go and talk to them specifically about their own creative. But if you want an opinion on someone, or if you want just to bounce an idea off, of course you talk to Chris Jericho and Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley, and you go, okay. And then he says, well, and they're people that aren't, they don't have an office job per se, was the phrase that he uses. But then he says, and, there could be those that do have an office job. So Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and you're thinking, well, of course, they're executive vice presidents. Not that that title means much. They're EVPs in name only, but they have an office job. So for him to say, and a big pregnant pause when he does it. Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and CM Punk. Does that mean that Punk had a bigger role than we initially thought? Now, it isn't clear in which capacity CM Punk worked in the office. It's certainly curious that Khan would have brought up his name, though, at the same time as the other company EVPs. Again, as I mentioned, Punk stated he was, quote, trying to run a business at the AEW All Out Media Scrum. Now, Khan's words do add to the story that CM Punk's role in AEW was much more than just a talent, just a wrestler. With Punk suspended along with the other members of the AEW roster, namely those EVPs in Omega and the Bucks themselves, whilst an investigation is conducted, this disruption on the office side of the business is also going to be quite interesting as well, as this investigation does drag on with potentially, according to Dave Meltzer's report last week, one party certainly being uncooperative and having legal threats towards other people within the company. And again, this is now, I'm speculating a lot here. It must be said, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to make stuff up here. I'm just going to try and read into what people are saying and try and see which direction this story is going in. But thinking back to it now, let's say, for argument's sake, and we don't know that CM Punk is that uncooperative party. We don't know that CM Punk is the one that has legal threats against one of the other parties. We don't know. That it could be Ace Steel, it could be the Bucks, it could be Kenny Omega, it could be Matt Jackson, Nick Jackson, because everyone was involved in this brawl. But let's say, for argument's sake, hypothetically, that it is CM Punk. That makes all of this even more complicated, because you've not then just got a talent. You haven't then just got a talent possibly suing a company or possibly suing their boss or possibly suing another talent. Potentially, you've got a company employee suing the company that he works for, and that can get even murkier when it does come to employment law, when it does come to an unsafe work environment, when it does come to grievances against his fellow employees. All of this just got a lot more complicated and a lot more drawn out, certainly. And again, this would go back to this: if he's not just an independent contractor, and again, this is a key thing as well. If you're a company employee, that's massively different to being an independent contractor. And if he's a company employee, i.e. he does have an office role, and we don't know if he's got two different deals. That's possible. He could have a talent contract, which is an independent contractor contract, and he then could have an employee contract if he's an EVP and he's doing stuff in the front office. Again, if that is the case, things get much more complicated, because a buyout of his contract suddenly becomes a lot more difficult. Because if you're an employee, there might not be no end date on your contract. If you're an independent contractor, there's a beginning date and there's an end date, and you can buy the person out of that. You can buy the person out of that and say, we're going to pay you X amount, or we believe you violated this contract, we're going to let you go, etc., etc. If you're a company employee, there's far different, bigger hoops and hurdles you have to go through. We're talking employment tribunals. We're talking, this could get really, really, really complicated then. And this might be why we're not going to see really any resolution to the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, and possibly even CM Punk. We know he's injured. He's out of action for 9 months anyway. But this could be why, as I mentioned, this gets a lot more complex, and realistically why we might not get any answers regarding this for a really, really, really long time. If that is the case, again, things could get much more complicated. And looking back on it now, do I expect any kind of resolution to this anytime soon? No. What is certainly curious is, realistically, we haven't seen CM Punk or the Young Bucks or Kenny Omega's names be brought up at all on AEW television. Granted, that interview wasn't on AEW television. It was on Ariel Helwani's YouTube channel or on his podcast or wherever it was. But it's certainly curious that at a time where lots of people are asking Tony Khan's questions about Punk, about Omega, about the Bucks, and he always says, no comment, I can't comment on that investigation, I don't want to comment on that, whatever, he volunteered that information. He put that out there himself. He wasn't pressed on that. He was asked, who do you go to when it comes to putting a show together? Who'd you go to when it comes to bouncing creative ideas off each other? He could have left it at Bryan Danielson. He could have left it at Jon Moxley. He could have left it at Chris Jericho. And people would have said, okay, he's not going to bring up CM Punk's name, because why would he? Because this was in the days before Dynamite last week. This is several weeks removed from All Out at this point. So for Tony Khan to volunteer Punk's name and volunteer the Bucks name and Kenny Omega's name, especially when talking about people with an office role, is certainly curious. And even if it's kind of got a little bit lost in translation there, and he meant the people with the office roles and CM Punk, who doesn't have an office role. Again, why would he volunteer his name at this point in time? So there's lots of different ways you could look at that. He has an office role, or he doesn't have an office role, but he still considers him, it's not as if he's persona non grata in AEW in the minds of Tony Khan, because why would he bring him up when he's doing press? There's so many different ways to look at that, and I think it's a fascinating story. So let me know your thoughts on that one in the comment section below. Let's talk about Jon Moxley. Big week for Jon Moxley, of course. Signed that 5-year contract extension with AEW, and now he could possibly be done with Game Changer Wrestling after wrestling a match for the promotion this past weekend. According to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, Jon Moxley is done with GCW for now, at least. On October 7th, it was announced that Jon Moxley had re-signed with All Elite Wrestling through 2027, with the notes that he'd be exclusively wrestling for AEW and their international partners. This left his GCW status in question the night before. Now, GCW sources have claimed to Fightful that AEW didn't want Moxley to do the match that he did this past weekend and have asked their talent not to work GCW dates for months. Moxley had insisted on finishing out his run there and is not currently scheduled for any future Game Changer Wrestling dates. Now, what is certainly curious is that Stokely Hathaway and W. Morrissey, of course, other people that are now signed to contracts with AEW, were also involved in the match to further the ongoing storyline with MJF and Moxley. GCW reps claim that they had no say over the end of the match or how that would play out. Now, those that Fightful have spoken to believe that Moxley will still have the ability to work independent dates, but believe it will be on a surprise basis if indeed it does end up happening. In the past, when Moxley would work indie dates, most of the shows would throw everything they could to make it one of their biggest shows as a result of Moxley being on it. Fightful asked AEW officials on Friday about Moxley's GCW status, and then yesterday about GCW's account of things, but didn't get a committal response. So I would think, and we are going to talk a little bit more about Moxley, about not working with a contract, etc. But in regards to the GCW bit there, to be honest, I wouldn't be. I know that in the past when AEW first started going around, they said to talents you can work outside dates. The reason they said you could work outside dates when it first came around is because they could offer talent some money, good money. Tony Khan's a billionaire. His family are billionaires, and there's a lot of money there. They have more money than the McMahon family. They have more money than WWE. But previously, they were working one night a week, just Dynamite, just that taping. They weren't making a lot of money from Dynamite. They were frankly making no money from Dynamite. They were getting an ad revenue. They signed a contract with Warner Media that was, we'll go half and half when it comes to the ads. We'll put on the show out of our pocket, and then we can renegotiate. Dynamite was so successful that in January of 2020, they got a new television deal, they renegotiated, and Warner Media started paying AEW to put on Dynamite, to put on Rampage, to put on these specials such as Battle of the Bouts. That's how AEW became profitable in its first year, essentially. It was very, very successful. Because of that, they could start paying people more money, they could start signing more people, and then because of that, now they can exclusively lock in people and not have them have to go elsewhere to make good money. And when it comes to someone like Jon Moxley, who clearly, with everything that's gone on, with the aforementioned CM Punk, with the other people that come in, Tony Khan's decided, Jon Moxley is my guy. He is the number one person in AEW. Forget CM Punk, forget everyone else. I'm building this company around Jon Moxley now. And if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to build the company around him as my franchise player, as the person that I can rely on, I don't want him going elsewhere unless they're a promotion that we have a partnership with, i.e. New Japan Pro Wrestling. I don't have a problem with that. These independent dates, I don't want to lose exclusivity. I don't want to lose the name recognition, the value of having Jon Moxley on my show, so I'm not going to allow that. And that's just business at the end of the day. That is business. That is how it works. Also, as well, you could argue there is a lot of controversy around GCW in general. And I don't mean just the deathmatch wrestling stuff. That's whatever. If that tickles your fancy, that's fine. It's not my cup of tea, but it's fine. I'm not going to be like Outlaw Mud Show Wrestling, blah, blah, blah. It's not my deal. When it comes to some other things, though, of course there was the controversy about the COVID tests and all that kind of stuff. I'm not in the position that I know too much about it. All I've seen is the things that I've seen on social media. We don't know what's true, what isn't true, etc. Tony Khan just might not want his wrestlers to be associated with that. In addition to that, there was the clip that went around this weekend. I forget which match it is, but there's a wrestler tied up in the ropes, akin to sort of Tommy Dreamer, I believe it is. Or was it? I think it's Tommy Dreamer when he's tied up in the ropes and Raven hits him over the head. I think it's an ECW spot. It's basically similar to that. There's a wrestler tied up in the ropes, and the wrestler, chair shot, bang to the head. Bang to the head, bang to the head. In 2022, with everything we know about concussions, about CTE, in 2022, they're still bashing each other over the head with the steel chair. Not even getting hands up, not even doing anything like that. I doubt very, very much that the chair was gimmicked. That is ridiculous. And I know people can say, well, if that's what they want to do, if they've said they're going to do it, or if they said they want to do it, then that's on them. No, it shouldn't. It should just be outlawed in general. That's wrong. And I wouldn't blame Tony Khan or AEW officials for saying that, going, why would we be involved in that? Why would we want the champion, the person who's representing our company, who is the biggest star, we're saying is the biggest star in our company, why would you want him involved in that? It's bad business. So I don't blame AEW for that, and frankly, it's AEW's prerogative. If they've signed the talent to a contract, that's fine. Now, getting him to pull out of the appearance at the weekend, that's a bit dirty. He'd been advertised for it. He should show up to it. He did it. And that's because Moxley knows good business. That would have been bad business from AEW. But in regards to saying in the future, we don't want him at GCW events, that's AEW's prerogative. They can do what they want when it comes to that. Now, when it comes to Moxley signing this contract, it had been reported widely that Moxley was working without a contract before he put pen to paper on his new deal. As per Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio, Moxley's previous deal actually expired in July. Explaining the situation, this is what Meltzer had to say, quote, I know it expired in July. For whatever reason, the date July 22 rings a bell. I know it's within a week of that date. The week earlier, it's somewhere between the 16th and the 22nd. People thought when May came and went, AEW probably renewed his option year, or he had signed a new deal because he was still working there. His deal was extended due to his time off when he went to rehab. It extended through July. Then July came and went, and he hadn't signed. But he was not going to leave, so I guess he was working under his old terms, or they were negotiating certain things. Tony wanted certain things, Moxley wanted certain things. Again, that is just par for the course in contract negotiations. That's how it works. But again, clearly, very much clearly, AEW have got their guy, and they're going to build the company around Moxley. And considering the year that he's had, the reliability he showed, and all of the chaos in AEW, I think that's a pretty good idea, it must be said. Saraya, obviously, she has been cleared for action by AEW. There was, the discussion about coming into AEW, had she been cleared, hadn't she cleared? Of course, she got physical last week on Dynamite. It was reported that she had been cleared. Now, she spoke on a recent Twitch stream about being cleared to compete, where she revealed that she and WWE actually never had a discussion on her potentially returning to the ring while she was under contract with them. She said, quote, we never had that discussion. I never had that discussion with WWE because they let me go. I've been working years to better myself and be healthier and stronger. Me, mentally, I never brought it up because I had this mental block. I want to be as safe as possible. I know what my body can do. Me and WWE never had that discussion about having a match. I never brought it up to them about me potentially wrestling. If I was to talk to them about it, I'm sure they would do the research. I wasn't mentally ready. It still makes me nervous, but I'm way smarter about it. I know what I can and can't do. I'm not expecting to do 6 German suplexes off the top. I'm not that wrestler anyway. I'm not looking to bump around like crazy like I did before. I need to make adjustments and be smart about it. I'm very aware of what I can and can't do. So it's quite interesting to say that, the narrative of, well, WWE never cleared her and WWE said no, so and their doctors are better than AEW, so the AEW doctor's wrong, this, that, and the other. Never had the test. She never went in for the conversation, according to Saraya. And if that is the case, then what are you supposed to say? As I mentioned before, when we spoke about her getting cleared in the past, there was a lot of reactions to people that were make-believe doctors on social media. I can't believe they would clear her. Well, who knows her medical records? She does, the doctors do. If the doctor says she's good enough to go, she's good enough to go. Now, obviously, you could argue, well, in the NFL, that situation with the quarterback from the Miami Dolphins that was concussed recently, well, that's, you don't, from a layman's terms, you can look and see that he was not okay. You don't look at Paige at the moment and say, Saraya, and say, oh, her neck's messed up. You don't know. You don't know. And only the people that know it's her and her doctors. And if they say she's cleared to go, she's cleared to go. Finally, Tony Khan has spoken about the rankings in AEW. Remember them? The rankings? Well, they've kind of disappeared a little bit recently. And speaking to comicbook.com, this is what Tony Khan had to say, quotes, "I haven't updated the rankings lately because I think so much has been fluid, coming out of Grand Slam Tournament of Champions in particular. It's a fluid situation coming out of Grand Slam, and I think now I'm reevaluating it and quite possibly could bring them back soon, but certainly made a lot of changes for the better that led to our best ratings of the year in many ways because we really zoned in and have had, I think, a lot of our best shows in recent months." So Tony Khan, I would expect the rankings honestly to phase out. I know he said he might bring them back, but I think Tony Khan realized, which a lot of people said, that you can track wins and losses, that's fine, but eventually it's going to become difficult because pro wrestling isn't totally about wins and losses. It's about stories, really. And I know that sounds very WWE to say, but that is true. That is kind of how it's always worked in wrestling. So there you go. But there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.